Okay. Are we on? Okay, well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to our May OSAC meeting. Let's go on ahead and begin with our roll call. Would you mind leading us with that, Barry?
Okay, Amber Reeves.
Here.
Chrissy Verbeck.
Here.
Jeffrey Wade.
Here.
Joanne Manieri.
Here.
Karen Noisy.
Here.
Michael McDonald.
Here.
Rita Trainer.
Here.
Todd Gleason.
Here.
And Tracy Bain. She's absent. And then we have our first director, Leslie Clark, myself, and then Mike Foster for council leads.
Great. Fantastic. Let's move on to the agenda approval. I know we saw different iterations over it the last week. Rita, thank you so much for cleaning that up and making it good to go for this meeting. Just curious, are there any other changes that need to be made before we proceed or considered before we proceed? Okay, not seeing anything. Let's move on to public comment then. This is an opportunity for those who are in the room, who are visiting us, to provide us with ideas that OSAC should consider. Also for those who are online, this is a great moment for you to speak for 5 minutes. Unfortunately, it's not a discussion, but it does tee up ideas for us to consider for future agenda items. I'm curious, is there anyone in the room who has public comments? Not seeing any. What about online? Okay, I'm not seeing any. All right, let's move on to our staff updates, please.
Want me to go first? I'll go first. Okay. I just have updates for programs. So the ones that passed. So the other weekend we had our fishing clinic at Purple Park. It was a big hit. We had originally 69 kids signed up. 29 no-shows though, and then 40 kids showed up, plus their friends and family members and things. So it was very busy. It was the pond. We had to move because the pH level was different from the big ones. They moved the small one behind the playground. So that one was really successful. We had about 10 kids caught some trout, took them home. Yeah, it was really festive and fun. A lot of them wanted that reoccurring because we don't do it so often. So we got a lot of positive feedback. CPW staff, there was 3 of them that showed up. They were really great. We split up the stations and the kids learned a lot. They got fish ecology education, how to put on bait. They had to do like classes before they got their rod. That's why. So it was really cool. Our pollinator, 2 pollinator events were canceled. So we had one on the 10th and one on the 13th. They got canceled because they had issues with the nursery. So they didn't have the selection we wanted. So we're gonna have to reschedule that. And
so the 10th and 13th, is there a time and location?
We haven't decided yet. These were the original times that just passed, and the days that just passed. So we'll have to reschedule it for sometime in June or July. So I don't know yet. That's what Friends of Cold Creek. And then I know we have probably a category in our schedules for a bird day, but that's migratory bird days coming up. And then I can share more as we later on the schedule.
We do a bird day.
I think it's only there as a reminder.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not until the reminder.
Yeah.
So if you want to talk now or later, okay.
All right, that's it.
Oh, no, it's even in the round. You do the round table.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when we cut and we were trying to.
So I'm just gonna hit some high points. The CDOT parking lot, they're working on construction documents for that and the trail. So that's moving forward. We don't have it. We'll probably have to put that out to bid depending on the dollar amount. Well, we'll have to put it out for bid and then it will go to town council for approval. The goat grazing contract that's funded through our FEMA hazard mitigation program was approved on Monday. That will fund our summer goat grazing, which will start in July. So, yeah, they're hitting the second half of summer for us this year. They have other engagements lined up.
Find you where they're going to be this summer.
It's a little complicated. There are 5 different locations because this was a FEMA project. We had to pick primarily locations that have not been grazed before. There are 2 reoccurring spots that they approved for us, which I think are Autry and tract H Vista corridor, even though we've grazed there before, they went ahead and improved them, but the other ones are some areas that we haven't hit before, so. The winter cool weather grazing is gonna be funded through the county, and we have a little bit more flexibility with that one, so. That's moving forward. We're gonna, sponsor a youth steward program this summer. The, Boulder County Youth Corps program, they distributed all their, available youth, so. We missed out on that allocation, so we're gonna do an in-house one, which we did during the pandemic, if you remember.
I wasn't thinking about it.
So, we're gonna be hiring a leader and 6 to 8, stewards to do work, so, we don't have the larger program of the county behind us, but we do have a little bit more flexibility with, some of the times when they're available and what we can utilize them
So to get this
for.
straight, they're from BOCO. No, this is our in-house.
This is gonna be in-house.
Usually it would be BOCO.
Usually it's FOCO, yes, and we did not get our application in time to get the allotted folks, so next year we're gonna make sure we get it in nice and early, but we're still able to do it, and we're actually gonna partner with Boulder County anyway on some projects, so.
So we'll have fewer than we've had in the past, because there've been 2 teams before,
Probably,
so it'll just be 1.
would be,
So it might
yeah,
limit.
like we might, instead of
It'll
having,
be a couple people less than usual. Usually it's 12 kids total.
And this will be 6 to 8.
This would be 6 to 8 plus 1 leader.
But it'll be different than our senior youth, right?
No, so.
Yeah.
It's different, that's.
Yeah.
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 So we're gonna-
Is this more expensive or less expensive?
That was my next question. Because fewer people.
well, I mean, the Boulder County program comes with some additional perks. So they help us with equipment, they do a lot of staff training, a lot of training with the youth, so they build that into their
And don't they
program.
even provide the transportation?
And they provide the transportation
I
and
noticed
yes,
in the
yeah,
email that-
so I mean, they definitely have a more robust program, and our goal would be to go back to that, but, I think this will be a different model for us, and
Yeah.
at least we have the opportunity to do that, so. I think everything else is covered later on in the agenda, unless folks have questions.
Okay, Councilmember Foster.
All right, well, first of all, I want to thank everybody that showed up to last month's council board dinner. That was fantastic. That was a really great event, and we really appreciate all the follow-up email. We continue to get trickle of email in from the broader community about thoughts on Town 15, and while there's a lot of folks that are just saying keep it open space, we're starting to get more of a cross-section of perspectives. So again, thanks for getting the message out and the email campaign going. It's fantastic. I also wanted to share with you, if you haven't heard by now, that the judge had ruled against the town on the airport lawsuit, and after an executive session, the council has decided to appeal that. So the appeal process can take 12 to 18 months as it works its way through the court system. So we have to, I think, file that by the end of May is our window. So the attorneys are working on that, but still another 12 to 18 months before we get a decision on that. And this will
From
be
that May date, from the filing date, correct?
correct.
Okay.
And that'll be with a 3-judge panel. It won't be just one judge looking at things. It'll be appellate judge. So there'll be 3 of them looking at all of that, making decisions. So we'll let you know once things keep going. And for those of you that aren't following the Marco Fire lawsuit, that is scheduled to go to trial sometime September-ish. All of the relative parties are interviewing their expert witnesses and discovery and all that. So it's a lot of administrative stuff happening behind the scenes for the trial that will start again sometime in September, early October. So, that's kind of the big news.
Awesome.
I'm sorry,
Thank you.
I'm not following that. What is the Marshall Fire?
So there are a number of entities, including the town of Superior, that are filing a lawsuit, to recoup damages. And there's a couple of parties involved with 12 tribes and Excel are the two defendants.
Thank you.
I have one more update. I just remembered, Weed Warriors. So we have our first communal meeting on the 21st, right? Wednesday, 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. at Miners Park. So that will be open to the public, not just Weed Warriors. So whoever just wants to do a one-off thing, stay for the hour, stay the whole 2 hours. You know, we'll have the equipment and stuff ready for you and just show up and pull some weeds. Thank you, Rita, for that. Yes.
Where is this?
Miners Park. With your neighbors, with your friends.
21st, from 9 to 11.
Okay, well, Tim, we are very fortunate to have a representative here today from Butterfly Pavilion. We have Madeline Barr. So glad that you were able to come today. And my understanding is you have a little bit of a presentation for us.
I do, yeah. Thank you so much for having me. So I'm Madeline Barr. I'm the Community Habitats Coordinator at Butterfly Pavilion. And as part of my role at Butterfly Pavilion, I coordinate our Urban Prairies project, which is a community science program where we work with municipalities across the Front Range, including the town of Superior, to improve the ecological health of open spaces. And so today I'd like to give you an update on a collaborative project with the town of Superior to assess the impacts of goat grazing at Harney-Listoka open space. So I'll give you a little bit of background about the project and then a brief overview of the major highlights as well as some next steps. And for anyone that's interested, I do have some copies, hard copies of the full report I put together for this project. If anyone is interested, there's only a few copies, but I'm more than happy to share the PDF with the whole committee. Okay, so like I said, Urban Prairies Project is a community science program. All of our volunteers are from the community, and they're able to get involved in restoration work right in the places where they live. So this project is powered by community science. So all of our volunteers are trained in plant identification, as well as how to conduct formal vegetation surveys. After going through that 15-hour training and then the additional training in goat impact monitoring, they're then deployed into the field where we do formal vegetation surveys to assess vegetation composition, ideally before and after goat grazing. So a little background about the project at Harney-Listoka Open Space in particular. Back in 2023, we established 6 permanent transects, 3 on the northern parcel of the site and 3 on the southern parcel of the site. Next party, thank you. Along each of these transects, we assessed percent composition of all the plant species as well as bare ground every 35 feet. Each transect was sampled twice after goat grazing. And then after all of that amazing data was collected, I then went ahead and analyzed to assess the composition of vegetation across Harney-Listoka open space, with the intent of you all being able to use that information to make decisions about future grazing efforts. And so now the fun part, the data. So again, this is just some very brief highlights. There's a lot more nitty-gritty, including species lists and all that kind of stuff in this report. But something that I'd like to highlight is the results from the northern parcel of Harney-Listoka. So something that I thought was really exciting There's actually quite a lot of native vegetation there. 38% of all the plant species were native, which is pretty even with the amount of introduced species at 39%. Another interesting figure is that 22% post-grazing was bare ground.
Excuse me,
five-
Madeline,
Yeah, of
do
course.
you have pre-grazing data?
So we only have limited pre-goat grazing data just because the timing of the goats arriving on site didn't coincide with our ability to mobilize enough volunteers. But we're working this year to get pre-goat grazing data on some of those sites that Leslie was talking about. And that'll be really awesome because then we can make a before and after comparison.
Can I ask you a question? And
Yeah.
you're gonna get to this.
Yeah, absolutely.
But is it possible prior to getting that data to also do pre-seeding with a native mix? I've gotten some input on that about how in doing so, when the goats do their thing, then the seeds are ready.
Yes.
And then, you know, from both an economical and habitat and food source perspective, it would be beneficial if we could get that native percentage up. Is that something we're looking at? I don't know if that's a lesson.
We have done reseeding like the last 2 days. So after they've grazed, but before the goats leave, they go throughout the site and the goats think they're throwing out food, so they follow them and mush it in.
Is it possible to do that even earlier in the process?
I'll have to look at the benefit with the grass being high. I'm not sure the seeds would get into the ground as well, but I don't really know that. That's just.
And are we doing that while it's kind of I don't know if that's pre-seeding or during seeding. But is it like a pure native mix that's
Yes.
getting used? Or, 'cause I know the town has a couple different mixes, right?
We have a couple different mixes. Everything we've done in 2025 forward will be native. 100% native. We're doing the native low grow. We had a mix that was that Arkansas mix that wasn't 100% native, but we've moved to a 100% native mix.
So, okay, so the low native is actually the native mix.
I mean, it's native to the Front Range, yes.
And are there some sections that are seeded and some sections that are not seeded?
There are some of the winter grazing areas we did not seed. So, yes,
Was that because of the timing?
just the timing was not.
Not a time for it.
It probably still would have been okay, but we did not do that. But we'll do it during the summer.
And I'm sorry, is the mix you're talking about moving forward different from one we used before?
The initial one we used on Harney Listoka was that Arkansas mix.
The mix, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
this will be more like.
which had some species that were still prairie native, but not Colorado. Front Range prairie native.
Okay,
So, yeah.
so this will be prairie native and wildflower.
Yes, we can mix in the pollinators as well.
Super.
And were the transect areas reseeded?
I'm not sure about that.
Yes.
Yes.
They were? The scientist in me kind of raises my hand. It says, we need better controls here.
Yes, I love it. So I'd like to go over the 5 most common species we found on northern Hardy Listoka. The first was actually Erigeron divergens, or fleabane daisy, which is a native biennial forb. That was 15.2% of the coverage, which is really impressive. The second most common species, which is not that surprising, is Bromus inermis, or smooth brome, at 12.9%, which is an introduced perennial grass. Next, another exciting one for me, the Butaloa genus, so grama grasses. The 2 species we found were the Gracilis and the Dactyloides, so buffalo grass and blue grama grass, and those 2 made up 10.4%. The 4th most common was Convolvulus arvensis, or field bindweed, at 8%, which is an introduced forb, also a listed noxious weed in the state of.
Yes, it is. And really hard to get out.
Yes. And the fifth most common species was Agropyron cristatum, crested wheatgrass at 5.4%, which is an introduced perennial bunch grass. Overall, we found 17 native species, 14 introduced species, 5 of which were listed as noxious in the state of Colorado. And I do have that list here as well. So the listed species we found were Bromus tectorum, or cheatgrass, Convolvulus arvensis, field bindweed, Erodium sicularium, red stem filigree, Lanaria dalmatica, which is the Dalmatian toadflax, and Verbascum lataria, or moth mullein. So overall, and just a side note, this is just the species that were identified in the transect on the north side. Anecdotally, up to this point, we've identified over 45 native species across Harney-Listoka, including some pretty uncommon wildflowers, which is exciting. And if you want to go to the next slide, in terms of next steps, I'm super excited to share that we are continuing goat impact monitoring this season for second year post grazing at Harney-Listoka. We are also continuing pollinator monitoring at Harney-Listoka open space. And like I mentioned earlier, we're moving forward with pre-goat grazing, or pre-goat grazing data collection on a few sites that Leslie shared. So ideally this time next year, I might be able to come back and share some information about our findings from pre-goat here. And with that, I don't want to take up too much of y'all's time, but I'd be more than happy to answer any questions.
I have another question.
Yeah.
So we have identified that southern part of Harney-Listoka, excuse me, as a site for potential prairie dog translocation in the future.
Oh, interesting.
Should the need arise. So there's nothing imminent happening. It's just a parcel that's local, that we've worked through the channels to identify as that could be utilized. And I'm just curious, I mean, I know how prairie dogs graze and clip, and they are known. I mean, they have a unfortunate, one of the myths that's associated with them is that they eat and destroy everything, but they actually can unlock some of those forbs, and uncover some of those forb maps that have been kind of underground. Have you had any experience with more native grazing have you looked into that at all or studied that at all with prairie dogs versus goats being brought in?
I love that question, and we actually do have a running study on the plant species that survive in prairie dog colonies. I'd be more than happy to share that with you all. So we definitely do look into that, and that would be something really interesting if that does happen at Harney-Listoka to track. Because if you have to relocate them, you might as well replace it with the goats, you know? So yeah, I'd be more than happy to share that list of species that do survive in prairie dog colonies, because you're totally right. They are a keystone species, and I think that's kind of overlooked sometimes. So yeah.
Wonderful, thank you.
Yes.
I think you mentioned one or two of the grass species as being cheat grasses. Are you finding that the prevalence of cheat grasses is growing?
Unfortunately, I can't say whether or not it's increasing just because we only have this 1 year of data. After this year's data, I will be able to tell you if cheatgrass has declined, stayed the same, or increased. As of last year, it was 3.5% of the coverage on northern Harney-Listoka.
So the plant life along the Meadowlark Trail, at least, changes a lot seasonally, month to month. So it seems that if you're doing a pre and post graze transect, you need to do them at the same time of the year.
Absolutely.
Is that the plan?
Yes, that is the plan. Unfortunately, since we are powered by volunteers, a lot of that does depend on capacity. So there might be a year where it's just me going out there, but we are absolutely doing it at the same time. It wouldn't make sense to do a pre-goat in May and then the post-goat in September.
And I guess if the town is reseeding with the goats, so that your data aren't screwed up, I guess I would urge the town not to reseed your transect areas.
So I get your point. I would say that's not an issue just because we're monitoring the effects of restoration. So we're not gonna publish this data in a scientific paper. We're not making, like, this is not necessarily an experiment. It's more so to benefit the town and your restoration goals. So if you would like to see the transects, that does not interfere with us at all. We're just here to support you all.
It's increasing effects.
But you'd be slowing down the restoration if you didn't do the seeding. So
But then
from our,
we seed and not bother with,
the
all the manpower of surveys. It just,
Survey what the goats do, and we wanna survey what the
Right.
reseeding does, both, so maybe
Right.
we can pick some locations.
Sure, yeah,
To keep
Mhm.
clear of seed and some to seed.
sure. And I'd be
We'll
more
just have
than,
to coordinate that.
yeah,
Um,
Great points.
yeah, that is a really good point.
I was worried about with the weeding where we clear off the invasives.
Yeah.
And then if you don't see,
Yeah.
they come right back, or some other invasives.
you guys need a pocket full of seed.
You know, hard potted forty crosses taking over some areas that we cleared of other stuff.
Yeah, please.
How, I probably should know this, but how is the work that Butterfly Pavilion does for like our town, how is that funded?
We are funded by grants, my program in particular. So Urban Prairies Project is a completely grant funded program. Right now, most of our funding comes from the NEAP grant, which is a national grant focused on this kind of work. Exactly where that funding comes from changes year to year, but this program is always funded by either grants or private donors.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
Good to know. Thanks.
And then,
Yeah.
are there any upcoming opportunities to maybe help volunteer wise?
Sure.
These projects?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's something else I can send. We do ask that anyone who's involved in this kind of project goes through our core training, which is a 15-hour program in the principles of ecological restoration. And I'd be more than happy to share those dates coming up in September. That'll be the next opportunity.
Fantastic.
This is the one that Rita and I.
Yes.
Sister did, yeah.
Okay. Any other questions for Madeline?
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Amazing presentation.
Thank you. And I will leave these here with you all, and I will share the PDF so everyone can have access to that.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Okay, team. Another exciting topic is designing resilient urban landscapes. I know Joanne and Christy, you've both been working this a little bit. Excited to hear.
You would both weighed in on, you'd looked at the link that came and you'd suggested it might be something.
Yeah.
Right. And so we wondered, when we were preparing for this meeting and had the item on the agenda, whether an appropriate thing for OSAC to do to take advantage of this is to have your two groups, work groups, wildfire mitigation and yeah, that they could actually start.
Are there some
working on
synergies
that.
there?
Yeah, I think.
And
there's
maybe
definitely
even
some-
together, we didn't know, but that seemed like the most natural thing. OSAC itself, like as an entire group, really has too much on its plate right now to make this something that we do. But we wondered if your work groups could explore using.
Yeah, of course, and does that include what Tracy's doing? I can remind me, like I know you guys were.
Yeah,
More of that's gonna be different.
it's slightly different, but yeah.
The only reason I'm asking is she just has so much knowledge of that as well, right? So we can,
Absolutely.
yeah, always, but yeah, we can get offline and dig into that more. And so you're really looking for more of us to come back and kind of make.
Absolutely. Yeah. Just wanted to talk about it tonight and, yeah, see how we can maybe participate.
And thought that
In
maybe it
this.
was something, I thought the wildlife encouragement team was in particular one that might.
If your teams aren't already oversaturated
Right.
with
Right.
tasks.
we've walked over to the part that's cut down.
Yes.
And, you know, we're interested in getting it rebuilt. And, you know, replanted and so that, you know, you don't lose the ecological benefit of having plants and trees around the tree.
Yeah,
So this could be a tool that would be helpful.
and we can look at both sides, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, yeah, sign us up, I'm all for it.
Okay, thanks, Keith. And next up, Boulder County Landscape Architects to help with Coyote Ridge Trail Design.
That was, I think, two items on the agenda that I think maybe are pointing to the same thing. Is that the same as item I?
No,
No.
Different.
this came up at the last meeting.
I think it could end up being the same thing in the
They
end.
seem interrelated. I love it.
This was actually the aspect of what it came up in the last meeting. And it was asked, we had asked Mike if, and he explained that there was a landscape architect there and is there any chance that they could provide some information for us, is largely what this one was. And I don't know if you had an opportunity to talk with
I had
them.
emailed OSAC.
Yeah. I think it's the same item. That's what.
Yeah.
It's the same.
With the.
Oh, but that was with consultants, third parties. That's the I item.
Oh, okay.
This one was actual
Yeah,
Boulder County landscape architects that are employees of Boulder County.
there's not capacity. They do not have
That's,
capacity.
that's, we were kind of expecting it.
You've got rolled up enough. But
Yeah,
Okay,
but we wanted to at least ask. Can't hurt
well, that's
to ask.
helpful, and you're right, that was confusing. Should've lumped those
And
together.
there's no overlap there with what, super glue or whatever it was, the consultant did, I mean, did they? Is this doing the work or is this like figuring out? what-
Queuing up the work, because
I think it's taking a deeper dive. So while they did some high level evaluation and recommendations, I think what we're looking for is, okay, what trails are the highest priority or what locations on what trails, you know, what need the work, and then hiring a consultant
Right.
to,
Moving towards
Yeah.
implementation of some of the work plan, right? The steps for that.
Okay. So it's more of a detail.
So it doesn't negate
Yeah.
all the work. It's.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I was just wondering if there was overlap from what we already paid for, right? I guess, that's all.
And the names of the consultants that I shared, they can help with trail design and slope and all that kind of good stuff. So,
Yeah. Thank you.
and they're relatively inexpensive from what I heard.
even better.
When we get down to I, we're gonna ask you to give us a ballpark number of what you think. Give you a moment to think about it, yeah.
And so maybe it was good that we staggered it, right? Okay, anything else on that? Okay, so it's time once again to look at property evaluations. We have found as a committee that this has been such a useful document for us to maintain. It's always a bit quirky when we first look at it, because we always look at the methodology. Is this the right methodology that we should be using? And there's a lot of subjectivity in it too, in terms of how, because we're not scientists, right? So we don't, nor are we real estate agents. So we don't know what may be more accessible than other properties if they were to become available for purchase. And it's also sensitive, right? Because some of these properties we don't own. Town 15 is the only town owned parcel. So there are delicacies with that, sensitivities with that. That being said, whatever we end up doing with the spreadsheet that Rita sent out last week, it usually helps us get a sense of what those priorities are for OSAC. So we can update it and we can share with recommendations to town council, to other committees in town, and really any resident who's interested. So Yes, we're gonna start looking at that again. Rita sent that out as homework. You want our input by the end of May.
By the end of
Right.
May, so that at the June meeting, we can actually vote on it, because that's the time frame that Leslie's explained that we need to get it done in. So please, if you have any questions, reach out to me if something isn't working for you. Amber, I know you've always found a way to work around not doing Excel and using.
Oh, yeah, we figured that out.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
Me too. No. And then also if any of you need a field trip to go
Yeah.
see places, that's something that we can coordinate as well.
Just a couple questions on criteria. Probably because I'm a newbie.
Mhm.
I'm gonna use that newbie thing as long as. We own Town 15, the others on the list, we don't own. So how do we rank something we own versus these others that we don't own when the criteria include pricing and?
If it would have gotten, if Town 15 gets rezoned, is right, open space natural, the open space fund would have to reimburse the town for what the town paid for the property. I don't remember the date when they bought it, but whenever they bought it, whatever they paid for it, the open space fund would have to reimburse them. Now, obviously, the open space fund currently doesn't have the funds to be able to do that, but over time, that would be the commitment.
So we consider it equivalent to non-owned properties.
In terms of the impact on the fund.
And the
I think that's a
funding of
fair
it, absolutely.
evaluation,
And it's not current value, it's
and that's what Ryan had told me, and I'm going on his, because he's the one that trained me in all of this.
Yeah.
And that's what he said had been the practice.
And the pricing of it too, and this is where it does get into those gray areas, because what we never know is what funds could potentially come available to help offset future costs. And we've seen a lot of grant money, for instance, with some of the Coal Creek properties that have come in and helped subside costs. And so, I mean, I don't know if we'll ever have,
So the criteria that's called attainability has us ranking based on our assessment of availability and price.
It's very subjective.
Yes.
Well, yeah, I don't know how to be subjective about price. I have no idea the price of any of these properties.
Right.
I don't know whether anybody does.
Right.
Maybe we shouldn't be using that criteria.
yeah, and this is where we say this every year by year.
So
Yeah.
if there's a way to do it, you could ignore it and not weight it at all, in which case it's neutral across all properties. I struggle with the same things. We don't really know it's attainable.
Mhm.
That's the whole mystery of this. It's just that an agenda that if it did become available, we've already done some thinking about the property and how it would fit with other open space.
So are you recommending we rank all those properties uniformly for that criteria?
Small zeros, make small fives. And I've got the same way to use the gate in the way.
I make them different, that in my head, it's exactly. So it's things like, if you're talking about, and I know these are the lowest rated one, but the 76th Street parcels, they have multiple owners.
Yeah.
And so to me, that automatically makes those less attainable, more difficult to acquire. And the same is true with those bulge
It's not based precedents when you did have a price. Maybe that flights down there like it's a legacy kind of item, but we don't know. And, you know.
And you could look on Zillow and see if you can find or you could look at what the market value, the assessed value, the market.
And that's what we have done.
On the BOCO property reports. So it's not like there's no information available out there, because I've looked at those numbers before.
I mean, if it's helpful, I could send out that summary of all of our purchases, the acres and what we paid. Obviously, the ones that we've purchased more currently are gonna be more,
Right.
you know.
And that summary exists in the report that we put out. It's in the back,
Okay.
but what it doesn't have is like Town 15, I don't think, because Town 15 isn't.
Yeah.
Wasn't purchased by open.
But if you do go on the county assessor page, you can look at the last
sale price on those properties.
And you can look at what they have as the market value.
Yep.
So because the taxes are based on
Yeah.
what they consider the current market value, the county. Which has.
Or rather than all of us doing this individually, it doesn't seem to make sense for each of us to go in and do all this homework. If it's available and one person doesn't want to share it with everybody.
For the price piece.
Yeah,
For the price,
For the price.
I can go on the BOCO and get for the
I mean, even if you look it up
705 or 705.
historically what the price is, it doesn't mean that the price will be.
Right.
That's why I think. of BOCO.
And there's no real information on availability, right? I mean, the Zacharias property is for sale sign on it.
Right.
None of these other properties have for sale signs on them.
Well, in
Right.
76,
76.
but that, the
Oh,
town is
yeah.
already going through that. Well, the one portion of it.
Yeah.
The southernmost portion.
Right, right.
Yeah, yes, I didn't remember what you said.
I've sold several hundred country properties as a master commissioner back in Kentucky, so I mean, I know something about evaluating country properties. The attainability of these properties is a wild guess. You can look at willow, you can look at tax base, and I think that ought to come out. I think you shouldn't have been, I mean, our wild guesses on attainability aren't gonna help the council, I don't think.
It seems that I would agree with you. It seems that having this attainability criteria diminishes the rigor of our ranking. Because it's totally arbitrary. We're not informed.
Yeah.
You know,
It is arbitrary, right?
Well, yeah,
I agree. I
I
didn't
guess I'd
say
look-
wait, because I didn't know that was my way of.
And that's what we normally do is.
So why don't you read it, weighted all the time, or just delete it?
oh, that was all, the ranking system existed to be, I just inherited. I didn't create it.
Yeah,
So I can-
it's been an ongoing, and again, we have the same conversation
Yeah.
every year, which is fantastic.
So you don't have to. do
And
anything about it. We did
I
it.
think, Kara's opinion, I would be great throwing out that column. I'm curious if others agree or disagree or.
I'm just thinking about like if you have a top three that fit the both sides, mission and vision, right? Like those are the properties one, but one of them is gonna, we know is gonna be so costly.
Yeah.
Is it here?
Maybe you can put it on the top three, so that's why I'm thinking.
That's exactly what I was gonna say.
You know?
So
Could you be
Oh, because I know.
the size of it? We're gonna go out and get some rough. And to Joanne's point, maybe we go out and get rough information and we all use that.
Can I back us up like one
Yeah.
in the discussion, and I'm not, Councilmember Foster, I'm gonna ask you a question. And I'll bring it to a circle here in a minute, so, and I fully acknowledge that I have to be gone from spring events, and I feel badly about that. There was a death in my family, and taking care of all the things after that, and we have another family member with a terminal illness who's reaching the end of life. So I haven't been there, and I fully acknowledge that, but after some of the emails that have come through from residents, I know the most recent one that Ari forwarded to us, referenced a conversation around, the last quarter, the Arbor Day event. Are you able to summarize that a little bit, just the conversation with the resident about, just about what's happening with open space properties? And again, I'll come back to this in a second, but I was just curious if you could summarize that.
Sure, appreciate the question. This individual was just really curious. They were new to Superior. She and her husband had just moved here fairly recently, and they were asking a lot of questions about just some of the different open space properties that we have, undeveloped parcels of land, and they were just more curious about what's happening in downtown with businesses moving in, what's happening over at the marketplace. They love Costco and Target. And we got talking about Town 15, and they were asking questions about, are there other parcels of land in Superior that are undeveloped? And I said, yes. And we started talking about each of those, and Zacharias was one of them. And I was sharing some of the community feedback around the community. A lot of the community really wants to see Town 15 zoned as open space permanently. And she said, well, what would that mean for development? And so that's how we got into this larger conversation of development, on Zaharias and Town 15 and over next to Guardian Storage and a couple of other places. And so she was just real more curious about, broader development across the town and how the town preserves open space and how we balance that need for businesses and residents. So again, since she and her husband were new to Superior, I think definitely coming from a place of curiosity and just trying to understand what's happening in town.
So can I ask you, and maybe not, it's not just you individually, but maybe you're able to comment reflective on the council, like, is there a feeling, or do you feel that one or more of the parcels on our rankings list needs to be available for development?
I personally believe that, yes.
Okay. And yeah, so I think it's all kind of coinciding with our process right now. Kind of everything that has been stirred up related to Town 15, which I think, it's been great to get so much public input. I'm a little concerned, and not what you're describing, but I think with some of the emails that have come in and just in speaking to a resident a couple weeks ago, I'm a little bit concerned about how the narrative is developing around all of this. There's kind of a sense I'm getting that people are feeling the need to develop an argument around why one parcel should be developed over another. In talking to a resident a couple of weeks ago, there was the comment made of, well, it feels terrible to pit one neighborhood against another or one area of town against another. And I said, do you have that sense? Because I've never had that sense. But it's growing, and I think it's building. And there's some narrative around, for example, why it should be Town 15 over Zaharias, for example. And why, if the town is looking to develop one of the pieces, why it needs to be one over the other. I'm a little concerned with that and feel like, as a committee now, as we go through this process, in the 5 years I've been on here, we've never been in a position like that where we've had to look at our list and say, well, we need to pick which ones are going to go on the chopping block. And I'm a little bit worried that we're going to look at our rankings now and, for a variety of reasons and, things that we have connections with. I'm worried that we're going to start looking at our rankings that way. And I just feel like it dilutes our process a little bit if we don't back up and take a community view, because I feel like as an advisory committee, we still have an obligation to represent the full town of Superior when we're looking at these. So that's just my kind of concern and comment, is I think we need to be aware of that. Now, we're getting this information that it sounds like council has an appetite to develop one of these, but I don't think we need to back off of our mission and our view of acquisition and say, well, we're going to have to just chalk up some of these as a loss. Which one's it going to be? I just don't think that's how we should be looking at this. And I'm just a little worried that there's some narrative out there kind of feeding into that. So I'm just bringing it up because we're doing our rankings now. And
when you think about the comprehensive plan and what they're doing here in the community center, I forget the date, they call them the opportunity zones, and they're asking people who are attending to actually do exactly that, to pick, what do you think should be done with this? Should this be developed? Should this be open space? They are going to ask that question on each one of those parcels.
And I want to just add a little bit of context, at least from my perspective. I don't have a sense that there is a desire for eminent development on any one particular parcel. I think it's more about preserving future opportunities for continued sales tax-based development. So it's not like I have not seen a proposal come in to build a 60-story high-rise on Town 15. Doesn't exist. But there's some feedback from the community that I've heard personally that feeling is out there that, oh my God, the town is gonna be building affordable housing, high-rise affordable housing on Town 15. I don't know where that rumor has started, but that is false.
Dialogue about this months ago when the topic of Town 15 came up, and I don't remember who was here from the town, but we weighed in pretty strongly as a committee of like, hey, we're not gonna just offer up, you know, like, okay, take this parcel or this parcel for housing, right? It was something like that. I just want us to maintain that level of objectivity when we're looking at all the parcels, like to remember our mission and vision. Like, I don't think we as a committee have to be offering that up, even if the comprehensive plan puts those opportunities in front of people to say, hey, come as an individual and pick and choose what you would like to see. Like, that's not what we've ever been asked to do with our rankings.
What I do think is fantastic about the planning commission is this is a town's objective to do, no kidding, deliberate planning across the board for our town. That is fantastic to have that level of strategic focus. But what I think it does conjure up is how many times has our town had public engagements about various locations? I mean, since I've been here many times, since I've lived here, and where it does become, there should be a rec center, where should we put it? And you lose the focus. So I like what the planning commission is doing for the comprehensive plan. I don't see it as though making our committee do that work for them or do that work for town council. I still see this as very much a true look at those open spaces that if they were to become available, Town 15, which we have documented history since before 2010 that this committee has seen this as open space in its undevelopment. And that's why we look at Town 15. I think as we look at the methodology, and we can talk about what needs to be in there and what doesn't, our focus should still keep to our mission of acquiring and preserving, and think that will flush out. It does every year and you're right, there are a couple properties that tend to be up there. And as we look at that criteria, I don't think that will be swayed much. I mean, there's subjectivity involved, of course, but I don't see our role as a committee in terms of teeing up where there is going to be future development. I don't see that as our role at all. Our role is about open space. And it's a prioritized listing of those properties that hopefully the town council will look at it and recognize these are their top choices. These are maybe down towards the bottom. And I'm hopeful, and I know it's not guaranteed, but I know that as we present this document to town council, my hope is that they'll look at that and consider, well, if there is to be any development, maybe it is on some of the parcels lower on our list. I mean, that's our hope as a committee, and that will be our recommendation as we move forward. But I don't see this as our call to rank order where there's going to be development. I mean, that's not our call.
Right, and that's good to hear you explain it that way too, because I just felt like, you know, with kind of input and dialogue circulating out in the community, and really kind of one area of town right now, like that we make sure we stay objective.
Right. And you know, Amber, I feel like the last iteration that we saw with this was with the Park and Rec Open Space and Trails Master Plan of 21, right, where it really did become a slinging words and ideas and projections of what parcels could become. And that is what I do like about the Planning Commission's role here, is hopefully it will provide that strategic focus. And so I want it to come with welcoming, and hopefully we're going to have a meeting with the Planning Commission, but I hope it comes with residential input because we've had so much of it. I hope they accept that into the plan, but I don't see that as our role. But what are your thoughts, team?
I agree. I think we never weighed in on where we should or shouldn't develop. It's really just what the prioritization of open space available, or, you know, and then the other situation I had too is like Town 15 is the hardest. It's kind of apples and oranges, right? Because one is owned already, but one is not. And you know if that could be viable option. Yeah, I think we're neutral or independent from any kind of development discussion. That's always how I viewed it, like, that's not our job.
Yeah.
Right.
And our next meeting is June 2nd. The planning commission meeting that you was talking about, and if any of you guys can go, that would be great, is June 3rd.
And that's.
And then the
goals.
town has it on their agenda for June 29th, which is why we want to have our property evaluation for this year done to be approved in next, in the next meeting. It's just.
Agree.
Kind of,
Same criteria, are we saying we're gonna throw that out, or do we wanna have one person give us all something to normalize it?
I'll look up the 6 properties, well, more properties than that, like 76 to 7. And I can see what they say is the market value.
Okay.
So you'll have that piece,
I think
I'm sorry,
that'd
do
be
what
That'd be
you
helpful.
said.
Boulder County. There's a Boco properties, too.
Yes.
You can. Well, our taxes are, I mean, it's as much.
But that, I think that getting reduces back to, well, it's. I mean,
I guess
it's so.
I see that it's there at least
It's just
consistently
speculative.
evaluated.
Yeah, what do you think there's a better, like, just,
Well, whoever does the negotiations for Superior, you know, has to have that knowledge. I mean, if we know something about the price that the negotiator doesn't know, or we think we know something, you know, whatever we say could affect the negotiations that go on between Superior and the private owner. And
Oh, so you're talking about when an actual sale.
expressing no opinions. I think it all, you know.
Land on mixing that altogether? But because of the apple oranges thing, I mean, and 76th Street is already headed towards something potentially.
It's the
So-
76, that's the
Just
smallest.
that, yeah, but it's not like that's sort of
I agree.
speaks to that area.
Pricing questions just too squishy. I mean, I
Yeah.
don't know that data, but we could say desirability, right? Like what would be on the top of our list? And that's ultimately what we're doing. We don't
maybe
know.
a wild guess, though, it's better than all of us assuming something different.
True.
So
Yes, we do.
I mean, to me, doing something where we're all using the same thing kind of normalizes. But I still think it's important to include, because we could have, a top X number of properties that we think that like our vision, but then one of them is going to be so expensive that you might deprioritize because of that. Because it might be out of our grasp, the financial.
So,
I don't,
so what if we did not include it this year? Because there's no time to generate current market value for any of these properties really, and get data to you before beginning of
Could
year.
do the
Well,
Boulder
you
County
can
tomorrow.
get data, but the county assessor data is gonna be.
We have some data that's real.
The county
That's
assessor
up
is
to
already,
Well, the properties that are currently for sale already have.
asking right
no,
now.
everybody's, because you've got your property tax assessment.
and it isn't perfect.
It's already, it's nothing.
Oh,
Yeah,
But they update it every year.
Okay.
Well, the assessed value is, depending on the type of property you have, is a certain variable percent of the market value.
Would it
And they
be,
give you both.
would it be helpful, I mean, because I know it's all gray, but within the parameters of this scope, would it help if we talked about assessed price, currently assessed pricing? Knowing that it in itself is squishy, but if we put those words in our matrix is what I'm looking at. I'm looking at the attainability section right now, where it says readily available and reasonably priced. To your point, we don't know, right? But if we said, assessed pricing, I mean, is that helpful or is that still
We could
blurry?
put the market values and assessed values in for each one of them
Yeah.
in the black, like in the notes, and then you guys would have it.
so I think.
Yeah, I think that's the best. Yeah, at least
I think
we're using this.
we pulled out the 919 properties because that's in the queue.
Right.
So when we present this to council, can we,
No, that is still there.
it is still there? Okay, good. Cause I think it's important that they know that that is still a high priority for this committee,
Yes.
because we're still in the queue to look at that purchase for early 2026.
Oh,
911.
yeah.
Which,
And is that the same thing as what's listed as Oak Creek properties?
Yes.
yeah, the one
Is that
remaining,
singular? That's.
It
exactly
is singular now.
it is singular now. and
Previously, it had been.
we already have a loose purchase price, and we already have a letter of intent, and we already have verbal commitment from Mile High Flood District to fund the floodplain portion. So that's what makes that property valuable and attainable.
We could be helpful if we were going to run comps on each of these properties, but we're not going to do that.
No.
And somebody for the town will.
Well,
Until seriously considering.
But to Rita's point, I mean, on the county assessors, did they have the methodology that they use to assess the value of each property? And so at least it's an apples to apples. It may be off by an order of magnitude because that's not going to be the sale price, but it's at least.
But they.
It's slightly off, exactly. So it would be a place to start.
right.
I agree.
Yeah.
What about the other parameters that we look at, for the methodology? Any other thoughts on that?
We're all good, so.
I question.
Management sometimes is the other gray one of how do we know if something's threatened by development? And the properties are for sale and there's a chatter about it, right?
No,
So I question equating a value with size. Since, for instance, the Coal Creek property is a small piece of property, but it's relatively valuable from a ecosystem perspective and development and preservation of the creek versus the Harrius or Old Jack, which are larger properties, but
It's strategic, right? Like.
yeah.
but on the other hand, it's the Harris has Hodgkins Harris Reservoir and more birds and migratory birds.
But that we have
the
the
water
Well, there's
component.
water.
And we have flora and fauna. And so you would rank those as you see fit, high, low, and then.
Yes, but management criteria is being equated to size as I read this.
Oh,
It's large,
management,
medium,
land
or
versus
small.
management. Okay, I'm looking at
That's
the square
independent
thing.
of looking at it from a water perspective or a wildlife perspective.
Yeah, and that,
And-
again, that was a
and it
criteria
seems that
there.
small, in the case of a Coal Creek property, Coal Creek adjacent property,
Mhm.
small may be a higher value than,
Mhm.
you know, large.
Yeah, that's fair, but
Is it?
it's a fair comment, but we are at least being consistent across all of those properties. And that's kind of weak because, to your point, the Coal Creek one is smaller, but it comes out high in the rankings overall. It is one of the top three and has been, I think, since I've been on, I don't know about before, but at least since I've been on OSAC. So that hasn't ever harmed it. Now, maybe that's because some of the other criteria comes in so strong that that's what makes up for it, losing points in that category. But yeah, keep an eye on longer. Carrie, do you remember why, or did that precede you?
Well,
But why is bigger better?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And I don't know the answers. I'm kind of scrambling here because I really don't know the answer.
And I think that maybe has decreased as an important factor as we've gained acreage. Now that our acreage has grown, the need for just pure open space acreage maybe is tempered a little bit.
Because of like, we got Coyote
Right.
Ridge and that.
I don't know.
That's bigger than everything else combined.
And you're absolutely, I mean, Coyote Ridge, I remember when we acquired that piece and we never expected that. And even with Coal Creek, I mean, again, that's the sensitivity that comes with Marshall Fire. We, as a committee, have long looked at that, and granted, small little parcel, but the corridor for wildlife is tremendous. And that's why it's consistently ranked so high, just the connecting piece to it.
In the town 15, is the wildlife corridor.
And really, that's what we see with Town 15 is the
Yeah.
whole stretch
Yeah.
of that creek.
Has anyone ever looked at splitting town 15?
That's, you mean, are you talking splitting the juice?
Yeah, like-
And when in some of those
Yeah,
emails
some
that
of
residents have sent in, they assess them.
Not that whole.
Well, I think the town has, but again, I would be very careful, or at least I would advise our team to say our focus remains on open space
Yeah.
priorities. In terms of how things could be partially developed, I mean, those are negotiations that our town council could do with our input on the impact of our wildlife corridors. Because there would be an impact to wildlife
No, I
corridors.
agree. I just wondered if it ever.
In the 2021 park master plan, I think there were a couple of scenarios that what you just described.
Mhm.
I don't remember them exactly, but I generally remember those.
Yeah, it was appendix D, and there were two options. One of them was to leave it as it is, and B would have been a recreational component. But OSAC, we did not provide that recreation input into appendix D.
I remember.
Ours was A.
Yeah.
And again, I think that's where we just need to remain focused on what is our mission. I think our town managers and our town council with input from everyone will have the deciding, well, they will definitely have the deciding force on what happens with that parcel. But we have to be good stewards to what the town has asked us to do. And that's not to do their real estate business.
And I think one thing to keep in mind is, the town 15 rezoning goes forward, and I know we're gonna talk about that. This committee can ask for conditions under that. So you could say, if it's zoned open space, let's say it comes out being open space recreation versus open space natural. This committee could say, we would like to, recommend that a portion of this be identified as a wildlife corridor.
Kind of similar to
Right.
area property where like, if it gets developed.
If it does.
we're gonna regulate
Like this
that we
buffer.
like to put for-
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really
So
good for us.
these kind of recommendations can definitely be, I think, have an impact or at least be communicated.
But I'm so glad that we are talking about this because we do hear that noise in the background because the town is talking about this right now. But if we stay focused on what our focus is with our mission, I don't think that will skew our ability to provide recommendations.
And I'm completely joking in my next comment. If the town can reach consensus on what to do with town 15, that'd be amazing.
Feedback that came after our dinner with the town council. What is the next step with that? 'Cause there was a
Do you
lot.
want to answer that or do you want me to?
It's gonna kind of fold into our next topic,
Okay.
so I'm totally cool talking about it right
Yeah,
now. It's all kind of the same thing, yes.
So, council is recommending that we move forward with a rezoning of that property. And I believe that recommendation is gonna go to the planning commission on the 3rd of June. So,
Rezoning based on our recommendation or
No.
rezoning of residential?
Open space
Sorry.
recreational.
Oh, open space.
Not-
that's the way
Right.
the recommendation
Which
is.
isn't what we recommend, right? We
No.
recommended not.
Right.
Trying to keep up.
Yeah, but that's what they're recommending. That doesn't mean that's gonna be the outcome.
Right.
Because they're gonna hear from planning commission, then it's gonna go to town council. So there's a lot of opportunity for input.
Okay.
They're just starting with that. And
Okay.
We're just trying to figure out what the
Yeah.
process is to rezone.
And
that.
does recreation include?
Yes, and
That's right.
well,
Will it go to
With
the
our
park committee?
we'll inform them.
Okay.
Just like we are here with OSAC, both OSAC and Park, to let you know that those opportunities are out there and then that's the recommendation. It's really kind of moving fast right now, like all of a sudden, so.
Hence
Um,
the comment earlier about going to the planning
Yeah,
commission
yeah.
meeting on the 3rd of
Yeah.
And so,
and then 9th going to the board.
What does it
The town
mean?
council
What
meeting.
does it mean? When, I know we talked about this last year when we recommended natural. But recreational, does that mean building a rec center? Does
It
that what
could.
mean?
It could.
Okay.
It could also,
Sports field.
Sports field.
the
like
recommendation
park.
could be to make it open space recreation with a caveat for civic. So it could be
Yeah,
a
I saw that.
library, or it could be, so all those,
but the rezoning would come first. And then the planning, and I would imagine there would be lots of community engagement before they,
oh yeah.
again, to talk about what could be built.
And you have to come up with money for all that.
Cause we do this every 2 years.
So I think my frame of reference is going through a comprehensive plan in another town. Where it was very collaborative with committees and all stakeholders were all engaged and there was a ton of visioning and concept planning in the beginning. Maybe I've missed some pieces, I don't know, but so you're saying that a rezoning is potentially happening before a comp plan is even.
Yes.
Before a plan for that site is developed.
Now, I would encourage all of you, if you get the chance, to listen into the planning commission's most recent meeting. And really the last 15 minutes or so, there is discussion, half an hour, discusses Town 15 and their understanding of OSAC's mission and goals. And I think it's fantastic. And because of this mutual understanding of each other's roles, they have invited us to come to their June 3rd meeting. And, some of the discussion in their meeting did specifically talk about whether or not they wanted to proceed with recommendations for rezoning before the comp plan has been published. That has
The other way around, why going through a huge.
Well, they aren't mutually exclusive.
It's zone commercial.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. It's a little backward,
Okay.
but they're doing it to satisfy
Okay,
all
I just
the,
wanna make sure that.
yes.
Feedback.
All this.
Yeah, there's been a lot of communication.
Going to their meeting, the planning commission's meeting on June 3rd will be a fantastic opportunity for us to talk about what our role is, listen to their thoughts.
Where open space.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think all of this is great. Anytime we have an opportunity to talk about
You
what
should all come to
OSAC
their
does.
World Migratory Bird Day.
Yeah.
And then the 9th,
Or
the draft for rezoning will go before town council.
Okay.
And so I encourage you again to listen to the planning commission's last meeting. I encourage you to join us for the June 3rd meeting as well as for the June 9th.
Okay, great, thank you.
And the planning staff are coming to our June meeting to continue the discussion on the comp plan.
Great.
So,
And then I think it's on the 16th.
Yeah.
Rita and I, on behalf of OSAC, are going to go and talk to the planning department. So, I mean, we have lots of movement here.
Yeah, but that is more to give feedback on what I sent you. Yes, thank you.
Okay, great.
Okay, so getting back to our properties evaluation. So this is all been good. And every year it elicits this kind of conversation. I think it's fantastic. Because the criteria we're using, it predates my time on the board as well. So it's always good to get these ideas, Todd. So thank you. I think we're gonna make some changes in terms of assessed pricing. What other thoughts do we have for this matrix? And our methodology. Yeah.
So with that knowledge,
Yeah.
it's going for, Tom is up for a rezoning discussion.
Yes.
That should also exit our brains as we're doing the rankings, correct?
I don't
If
think
we're
so.
looking- if we're-
I don't think so, because in my mind, that falls into the management piece on whether or not something is is there a chance that something would be imminently developed? At least that's how it's already in my head, is I know that the town is considering a rezone that could involve development.
And there's a precedent of those guys coming out and saying, we believe it should be open space. And that's, so,
Well, then
I
maybe
think
that
it's
goes back to
still-
the attainability thing,
right now it's commercial, so.
right? Like, if that's the case, then the attainability.
And I think in the
So-
end, every year. People evaluate it a little bit different,
Mhm.
and it is. Well, and depending on how they interpret those things, in their own value system, so we do get input that. You may look at it completely different than you look at it, but cumulatively, I think it works out. I don't know if that helps.
Usually gets us to the right place.
And I think Coal Creek
Yeah.
is a great example, knowing that there's just really one property that we're looking at, and knowing things are in the queue is promising, but it's not a done deal. So it'll be interesting to see how that affects our individual ratings, because undoubtedly it will.
Yeah.
To me, if they're not a done deal, we need to treat them like they're not a done deal and rank them.
Right.
Cause then if they're a done deal, then we'll go to the next one. Yes, not the next priority. You wouldn't. Yeah.
Yeah,
I think
that's fair. Okay.
It's
It's not a
Focus
perfect process.
a new version with.
I'll just put the,
Assessment.
I'll put the assessment and market values in each of the, in the notes under each one of the properties. Now for the 76, I'll just aggregate the 4 or 5 parcels that are there now. Not the one that is the done deal.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
It's always a difficult topic, but it is, I think, one of our most powerful products that in terms of providing recommendations to town council. So I thank you all for this discussion and wish you luck as you fill out the spreadsheet. It does.
It does.
Okay, so we've already talked a little bit about town council meeting issues. This is an agenda placeholder where we talk about things that we need town council to focus on. Is there anything that we have not talked about already that might need to go before town council?
Yeah. Beat us up.
There's oh, so much way.
Are we reviewing the mission statement?
That's the next
That's
item.
next.
That's the next item.
That's next. Okay, well, with that, let's go on ahead and move to item G. And open space feedback on our mission statement for town's comprehensive plan. Rita, you had sent that out to us. Did everyone get a chance to look at it? And thoughts about it?
And I'll just do a little overview that these goals are all encompassing for Parks, Recreation and Open Space Department. So there are pieces in there from that are more recreation focused or more art or historical. But there's at least a couple that really call out open space and natural areas and wildlife. Eventually, under each of those goals, we'll have some strategies that we can dial down on that and get a little bit more specific. But I think what you're looking for now is that very top level piece, that mission at the top.
Oh, and so because of the only comments that I had related to 3. So a goal. Because so you're saying we don't want to deal with that right now?
No, we can.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Because my concerns when I looked at 3, the goal is to protect the open spaces that provide unforgettable outdoor recreation, nurture wildlife, and support the natural ecosystems of our unique region. Love it. I don't have any issues with that. But update the open space management plan. That's something that we're doing now.
Mhm.
And they're putting this in a comprehensive plan that we hope would last 5 years.
Thanks.
Oh, 10.
Mhm.
Well,
Yeah.
2012.
something like,
5 to 10 depending.
yeah,
Your ability to fund them, but
yeah.
I think that's a good point, and maybe we look at something like actively use this document actively.
Or like
Mhm.
implementing the open
Yes,
space is
that's
the word I would
Yeah.
Versus up.
rather
I
see.
like that. Mhm.
Okay, and then it gets into officially designate open space properties rezoned to open space natural or open space recreation. Since we're talking about open space properties, and particularly I think with Town 15's got my sensitivity up on that. Wouldn't want it to be rezoned to open space recreation, not open space properties.
Mhm. And I can maybe shed a little light on that, is that we do have both park parcels, so open
Yeah.
space recreation parcels,
Mhm.
and we have open space natural parcels that have not been rezoned.
Mhm.
They have no zoning attached to them.
At all.
So that's where that's coming from. It's just, so if you like this corridor
Mhm.
was never rezoned as open space.
Really?
We renamed it open space, but it's part of the PD, so. There
So
are,
there's an example.
yeah, and. it
Like,
gets
I wouldn't want
really-
that to be, because I wouldn't, and again, this is my personal bias.
Mhm.
I wouldn't want that designated open space park, yet there is a park there, Miners Park, on the east end, and I certainly wouldn't want that park taken
Yeah.
away.
No, and I
see
think,
kids
I
enjoying
think we
it.
have that as a separate parcel, Miners Park parcel, and then we have
So
this
is that
corridor.
rezoned? Oh, you're saying that the zoning is done by
They're
parcel.
two different
yeah.
parcels.
Mhm.
So our zoning is really complicated because so much of our land use is designated by
PD as opposed
PD.
to zone.
as opposed to zoning. And this recommendation is that maybe we need to get a little bit more formal.
Yes.
You may or may not agree with that. So
Yeah.
all the parcels that were conveyed as part of the metro district with Rock Creek, Superior Metro Districts 3 and 4. They are part of the PD, they're not zoned.
Okay.
They're just.
So like Superior Commons is via PD, not zoning. It's not designated open space parks.
Superior
Commons.
and you know what, that, yes, I think you're correct, because it's part of the.
Yeah, interesting.
Yep.
Whoa,
Yeah, and so that may be something that,
yeah.
it sort of says we're supposed to do that in our charter.
Do the zoning.
Or it doesn't say zoning, it says officially designate,
And well, but isn't a PD an official designation?
and it may be, so
I don't know.
we may wanna, it's wordsmithing here a little bit, but we
So
may
that's
wanna,
one that
work on that, so it's a little bit more open-ended.
okay.
It seems to me we're kind of down in the weeds now.
We are,
Yeah. This is.
Okay, so we want to talk about the mission statement?
I-
Oh, it's always seemed to me a little bit unwieldy. It takes on too much. Mission statement serves any organization much better if it's a very clear and simple statement, not only that's stuck in a manual somewhere, but that everybody in the organization can know it and understand it.
mhm,
Now, that takes some thinking to get to that part where you can boil it down to a few words.
mhm. And
Peter
just to,
Drucker said, who's one of my gurus for management, he said that the mission statement you put on a t-shirt, that's a little bit of an exaggeration, but it's,
yeah, and just to let people know, this mission statement was for the whole department.
Exactly,
Right.
not just
Right.
open space.
Right.
So it is somewhat general. We tried to make it short, but inclusive.
It's asking to encourage a vibrant and meaningful community by providing exceptional open space. That's pretty concise to me. And I'm cutting out the word like the pros
Yeah.
encourages. blah,
I
blah, blah.
agree too, because
I don't know what
we're
encourage-
combining what we see as two committees, Park
Right.
and OSAC, so.
But they do have something in common. There's some essence
Mhm.
about what parks and recreation and open space are all about.
Yeah,
Mhm.
And
providing.
trails in there too. I'm never sure where the trails are in and out as part of it.
Both.
And we
Oh.
don't specifically call out art or history in here, but we say services. You know, and hopefully, that's implied in there.
What if we had something that could encompass maybe, yeah, all of that? So I'm gonna suggest this, we use that, our mission is to use Superior's open lands to enhance Superior lives. To me, that brings people into it. If what we're doing is not intended to affect the people in Superior, then what is the essence of what we're doing?
So we could add,
No, he's not saying that, he's saying replace.
Just replace.
And see,
He's replacing.
we could add for Superior residents or
Oh.
for the community at the end of this, because we also have to include park facilities like this one, the pools, the tennis courts, so we can't just say open lands.
But we could say for Superior residents.
We could say for,
Because it extends beyond our work to the whole department again.
Right,
The saying open land would at least include open spaces and parks.
and we do have open space in here, and we do have parks in here.
yeah.
Right. But then when you start chopping up like that individually, it's, I don't know,
She's not trying to chop it up. She just suggested we add a prepositional phrase at the end for Superior residents.
I like the idea that you need to put the person aspect in here. But I don't want to give up parks and facilities and those other things.
Facilities aren't open lands.
And the word open space.
That's
But
most
to,
people's thoughts.
to, I think, encapsulate that to not only the undeveloped lands, but also the recreational spaces.
Sure.
Let's call them thriving spaces.
But will people know what that is if we don't call them out as we have?
But that's part of, that's the beauty of the mission statement, is it's future looking. It may not be so specific that you're listing out everything, but we redefine the vocabulary to be thriving spaces. So whether you're at the bocce ball court, the tennis court, on a trail, you're in a thriving space. And what does thriving mean to you?
Maybe not the same thing as it does to you.
Exactly, and that's okay. And that's okay, because you're thriving, maybe you're thriving.
As long as we're both thriving.
Exactly.
Mhm.
So just something to,
But if somebody picks up and I'm trying to, John Q. Public or Jane Q. Public picks up the comprehensive plan and they look to this part, and instead of having the specificity that you currently have in here, they instead say the department encourages thriving spaces for Superior residents. Well, it's not really just Superior residents in reality, because
You could say the community,
thriving spaces for our community.
because then that includes.
T-shirt. But I don't know that we've provided information for that member of the public who's going and looking at it.
But then you get into, exactly, then you get into the details, which are the goals, but the mission statement, I agree, is something that should be one sentence that you can remember.
Yeah.
Like, have it think differently.
And we have
That's
a
the
lot of
mission
people who have to, all agree on this.
Right. But I guess what I'm just offering up is ways to capture a lot of different things in one or two words, rather than trying to list out everything, because when you list that, and this is a double-edged sword, when you list out everything, somebody's gonna feel left out. If you don't list everything, somebody's gonna feel, well, I don't see myself in this description, and so then that's
Hit the
part of,
balance.
exactly, and then I think that's part of our role as leaders is to
So how would it read,
Describe.
Leslie?
To provide spaces for the community.
I can't wrap my head around it in this moment, cause you kind of have to get thriving in there, we might have to reword it, but
No,
I don't,
I'm saying drop everything that we currently have, if you really want to try to put together Jeff and Mike's idea to provide thriving spaces for the community.
I think that's too general, cause it needs
But the
to,
specificity then was gonna come out of the goals.
it needs to be a mission statement for park recreation and open space.
That included, I think that should be included at the beginning, right?
And see, that's where I really want to like thriving spaces. I really see where we're going with it. I just, for me, it's not intuitive that we're talking at all about open space.
Right.
And to me, and the argument that I have with that is, and I understand people see things differently, but someone might see the patch of grass outside of this building as open space, and it is not. And I think open space should be, just as I think the word park should be part of this department mission statement. I don't think you can talk about park and rec without park and rec in there. I feel the same way about open space.
With open lands.
I-
With that.
I think, to me, open lands is gonna be interpreted by different people in different ways. I like the thriving and I like the people forward language, and we can try and work that in. I don't think we can give up saying parks.
Park, rec, and open space.
I have
Yeah.
an idea here, based on Leslie's feedback.
Yeah.
Superior's Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Department seeks to provide thriving spaces for our community.
It doesn't talk about, you're just talking about spaces. What about events? What about art? What about programming?
An event is a space.
Um,
Broad sense.
Why do you do that? Why do you provide thriving spaces? To enhance people's lives or not?
Yeah, for the
Okay.
benefit, I think, for the benefit
Thriving
of the
spaces to
community.
enhance our community. For the enhancement
Yeah.
of our community.
I just think if we make too many changes to this, I think the stuff below the mission statement is really where we can have some input. I mean, I'm not saying this information isn't good, but I mean, I've got to take this to the park committee, the historical commission, the CAPS committee, all the committees, and we can't put art, historic, and all those words in there, but I think it's more than space. We're providing more than space. We're providing services and.
So space is an opportunity? Was that?
I don't,
Kind of events, encapsulates a lot like National Trails Day and some of the events that Marty was alluding to. I mean, it's all those.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's, in my opinion, it's pretty good the way it is. I agree with what Jeff was saying. For the benefit of the community or something along those lines is fine, and thriving instead of encourages or vibrant is good words, right? So. But I think it's.
I think this is a really good dialogue that we're having, but I think in order to really flesh out the mission statement and the major goals, it takes a lot of time. I mean, it takes an intense session.
And I don't think we have a whole lot of time to do that. But maybe there's did I miss anything on these goals or on the ABC underneath these goals?
And that's really where I feel like we can kind of be in our lane. I personally feel a little bit uncomfortable chiming in on what I think the pros department of the town should make as a mission statement.
Yeah.
I do. I mean, we're OSAC, we're doing some of these other things, but if the topic is that department, like I don't work in that department. I mean, so I don't know. I feel like I'd rather be a little hands-on with the mission statement after a little more thinking.
I mean, I think we have the OSAC mission on the website. And maybe that, can be worked in here at some point.
That's gonna be a whole, I was gonna say, if we do that, we're gonna have to really take.
And that's on our work plan.
We'll
We,
get there.
yeah,
We'll get there.
yeah.
But how does this mission statement and these goals, serve your department? Do they work for you or?
This mission statement we've had for at least past 5 years. And we'll probably look at it. I think these goals are very similar to what was in the comp plan. The last time they've been updated a little bit to reference where we're at today, but there may be some there is an opportunity to, did we totally miss one? Do we need number 4? Do we need another bullet point under goal 3? And then the next step after this is strategies. So for example, under goal 3, under, adopt the OSAC recommendations for those 3 things. We've already pretty much developed the Prairie Dog Playbook and we've recommended that to the council. You've put together kind of a white paper or whatever you want to call it on dead trees, but is there, and we have presented that to council, is there another strategy under that? Rodenticides, we're just getting our, speed up on that one. And there's probably several strategies we still need under that one.
But other things will come up.
Other things will come up.
And that's where I was surprised to see that specificity in this type of a setting. I just expected adopt OSAC recommendations as the needs arise or the opportunity arises, something rather than spelling out these 3.
Because in the course of 10 years, you're gonna see more.
Even in 5.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's okay to have examples though.
Yeah.
So such as, as opposed to 4.
And another recommendation is to put in there the Coyote Ridge Management Plan. We probably should reference that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can we put in the 21 Parks and Rec master plan? Because I'm just afraid that feedback's gonna get lost.
The Coyote Ridge implementation that they're gonna be working on? Or are you saying the master plan?
Master plan.
The master plan, the one that exists.
Well, you were saying the management plan.
I mean, the Coyote Ridge
Yes.
master plan.
Okay,
Not the
not the
open space management plan.
Thank you.
Management plan, thank you. But what was is that what you said, the open space management plan? Was that the other one you wanted added?
No, I wanted to add the 2021 Prost master plan. It just feels like a few years ago that we did that.
One more thought on the listener's point.
Please share.
Added engaging. So Superior's Parks, Recreation and Open Space Department seeks to provide thriving and engaging places that enhance our community.
Say that again.
Superior's Parks, Recreation and Open Space Department seeks to provide thriving and engaging places or spaces that enhance our community. And again, I'm just throwing ideas out there to hear.
I think that's good, because I don't think you need to specifically say services or that, anything about, I don't know.
I think the
From a staff perspective, the people who provide programming, they're out there teaching swimming lessons or, senior programs, they don't resonate with places. It doesn't capture that.
Yeah, it should be about services and events have to be in there, I think, because that's a big part of the mission is education.
Programming though, it's like an isolated thing and
Right.
there's ongoing.
Thriving programming and engaging places.
Yeah, I agree that I think we should focus on the OSAC related items in here because this is a much bigger project than we can handle at this point in time.
Well,
Keep for entertaining money.
well,
Like brainstorms.
the reality is that the mission statement is more for staff than it is for us. It can guide us, but
Yeah,
it's,
it's both, but yes. I mean, it helps staff define what they should be focusing on, but it also helps educate the community on what our mission is, what.
Yeah. But we also have our individual OSAC mission statement.
You know, we've talked with the town council a couple of times about providing a second ranger position. Without success so far. My impression on both those conversations is that we don't have any real mission and objectives to guide us to even make that argument. And I think we probably need a second ranger position, but you know.
But I think here, are you talking, Jeff, I'm sorry to put you off, but here you're probably talking more about our OSAC mission. Which we will talk, we will talk about that for our work plan.
Well, but
That's a separate topic.
doesn't the OSAC mission flow from the department's mission?
It's not really part of this though.
It's because we're an
Should be,
advisory,
shouldn't it?
we're an advisory committee to the.
They
town council,
relate, they do relate, but it's not,
flowing from
it's staff versus, you know, the,
volunteers.
well, volunteers, but also that community input, machine,
But that
basically.
integrates that when we talk later about our mission and goals like that. That's something new where we may need to look at like our goals.
I think that's a valid point about
Yeah.
in terms of budgeting for a second ranger position. So,
And
yeah,
that's talking about a staff position, which is the department.
Right.
Post, and we're talking about, and so that relates to the mission of the department, does it? I mean, how do you make that, you know, with.
I guess I make the distinction because the OSAC is making recommendations or requests, whatever you want to call it, to the budget, but we're doing that out of open space funding. That's why the board is looking for us to take it from the open space lens, not the staff lens. But they do want the staff input. They want staff to say, yeah, we agree that OSAC's recommendation of thinking that we need that second ranger position. We absolutely agree with that. Or if staff would say, nah, we don't need that.
and quite frankly, under goal 3A, where we're initiating the open space management plan, this is part of our management plan. When we're talking about the resources that it takes to accomplish open space work. So it's in there, it's just not spelled out, is how I see it.
And I think from my perspective on the council, I'm looking for a business case. So number of programmings, number of events, and how that's number has increased over the year, in part because the town council said, oh, let's do this event, and OSAC said, let's do this event. So I can only imagine that the number of events maybe not has grown exponentially over the last 10 years, but probably pretty close to exponentially. And so in my mind, that's a pretty reasonable justification for adding headcount.
We were using the analogy artifacts of open space, the amount of open space acreage that it increased from this time to this time. And we finally gotten the one open space ranger position. And now after the Marshall Fire and with all the open space acreage, we still only have the one. And yet we're in a community that is pushing for more land management of our open space. We can't do it longer.
But in my mind, that comes to our budget conversations with town council. And as we present our budget to town council, for the purposes of this comp plan, I see that same element in our open space management plan, which is it's in 3A.
Right. But they do all relate.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And the mission statement supports it all. I think the mission statement, no matter how we wordsmith it, I think it supports what you're wondering about it.
Other thoughts on mission statement?
Or any of the goals.
Or any of the goals, absolutely.
And if you think of something after the fact, then you wanna shoot it to me. I mean, this is gonna be a working document until these plans.
Can we put it as a placeholder for next meeting?
Yeah.
Okay. So think more about it and come back in June. And more
The
ideas.
agenda's pretty full.
I like the word Friday.
Trails?
Naming trails is next. And some information was sent out, I don't know if it was you, Leslie or Pari, about how we go about doing that.
Yeah, and Rita, didn't you do a mock-up?
I'm
Didn't you
sorry.
say you did naming trails? Didn't you take a stab or the two of you?
Yeah, I think it just went to the
Okay,
two of us, right?
do we wanna pull it up?
Are
or do
you talking
wanna-
the PowerPoint that you're putting together? Is that what?
Name
We're talking
word,
naming.
naming.
Right?
To tee up this topic again, so for the last couple months, or couple meetings at least, we've talked about, wouldn't it be great to have some nomenclature out there so that it's easily identifiable, recognizable to residents on what names trails we have.
And
And-
whether we wanna recommend a policy or.
Right, and it's not that we need to decide anything even in this meeting, because we can come back next month, or I know Jane's already kind of full, but maybe July, but I think we need to have a conversation about where we think this should go. What's the process of this? What were your thoughts, Todd?
Well, we have, Mike and I have talked about the need for names or coding of trails in Coyote Ridge as we begin to develop it and implement the master plan. Because there are frankly just too many trails out there, none of which are named, and you can't have a conversation about where you need berms or where you need restoration or whatnot, unless you put a name on it. So there's a naming need there. Jeff raised at the last meeting, naming some trails in general. So Leslie sent, I think just Rita and I, a couple draft trail naming criteria. One was from the city of Greeley. Yeah.
Similar.
And so I took the Greeley one, to your
Yeah.
point today when I got it, and I changed it to town of Superior and open space and pros instead of nat, which is, their.
Do we wanna look
terminology.
at it, or do we wanna ask people to come back with comments?
I mean, it seemed like it was a list of do's and don'ts.
Yeah.
If you name it after wildlife
Yeah.
that's native, don't name it after.
I didn't see anything objectionable to it.
It wasn't saying there about it, indigenous.
Don't name it after, can't be a council member or anything like. That was what I read. It was basically the do's and don'ts.
Well, but there's some stuff in there I hadn't considered, like, you certainly don't wanna name it after an invasive species.
Right.
I put that.
About adoption. Jeff, I have your papers that you shared with me about the trails the other day.
Okay,
Do you want to share about that a little bit, or this is,
I can't remember, I sent that out.
no, but you gave me hard copies. Couple weeks.
But I'm not sure that, the names of all the
I think you.
main trails.
Yeah, yeah, set that up back.
Hold on. You can share it, anybody, it's fine.
And I will just say, based on the work that you did on that, I did share that with our GIS staff person, and they are working on labeling those trails that already have names.
Okay.
So that it'll give us a visual, and at least those regional trail names will be there, and we be able to see what's missing, what doesn't have a name. But yeah,
If I could share what my thoughts were about getting trail names, is that, I think just for fitness and recreation purposes, it's nice to have a chart of names of trails so you can, if you want to tick off which trail you want. Boulder County Open Space does this. They have 176 trail names. Now, some of those are just named connector to streets such and such, but you can set your own goal, and this is something they encourage you. You can set your own goals as to how many miles of trail you want to do within a month or a week or whatever. And as a total party, there's if you complete one particular program they have, you can get a Ranger Caddy patch. Obviously, haven't been too persuasive with Pari. I don't know if we need Pari's okay to put her picture on the patch.
They all here just to come back with recommendations on how we would like to proceed with the trails at our meetings.
I mean, and we're gonna come back to this next month.
So the Greeley policy is a reason, I think everybody felt it's a reasonable policy.
Yeah.
And I just sent out the one that I.
Why don't we consider it and maybe
Bring back any.
consider it for adoption next month?
Yeah.
And I just emailed that to all of you.
Yeah.
And then
Okay, we saw it.
read it.
This is the very superior one.
Oh, that's great.
It's historical thing, and for some guidance on historical things. And I noticed on their agenda that they're gonna form a naming subcommittee at their upcoming meeting.
Yes.
Maybe it would be worthwhile to send them this, identify it as a draft, but just to inform them that
It'll help them.
these are the guys,
Started.
Okay. They are meeting this Friday, but we are not to attend the meeting. I mean, of course, it's an open, it's a public meeting, don't misunderstand, but I had offered to attend it because, but what they said is that they're like our meetings, they have a lot on their agenda and they try to really stay on track.
but this would be helpful to
So
send forward.
that
to
is
that
certainly.
subcommittee that they're gonna-
Attach one to that message thing now that we have to use.
Oh, just email it to them, it'll get there.
Okay, so what's their, I mean, they're not OSAC.
Yeah, they're, cause it comes up when I do it. I know, I don't,
And it didn't.
I'm just learning how to do some.
So they're gonna come back to naming trails next.
We're gonna come back. I like the idea of looking at it and we'll adopt as our policy as we move forward. And then what I see in following meetings is, where would we start? Is it Coyote Ridge for those very reasons of no one knows, where we need to, improve areas for safety. But I don't know, we'll brainstorm that too. It could be, the trail that are off of Central, Circle Park. I don't know.
Oh, it's too Coyote Ridge, I think.
It's a
Degree of difficulty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Historic.
Yes. We talked about a color-coded map, much like a ski resort.
They all have mistakes.
Oh my goodness, yes. They're there. Okay, so we'll come back to this with a little bit of work for us to do for next meeting. Next item is Coyote Ridge Consultant for Implementation Plan.
So I think we talked about this a few times before. We thought, we acquired the property, we've had consultants come in, we've surveyed neighborhood feedback. Next step is to start building a work plan to implement whatever stages we think should come first, second, or whatever. And so that's where we discussed through our meetings, can we hire someone to help us with trail improvements or maybe even sequencing of what we do and build out there. So I think the ask for this item, and Todd obviously jump in because I've been talking about this, is in order to engage a consultant for this planning process, again, it would use what was already done and all the feedback we've gotten, but we need funding to hire somebody to say like, oh, I think you should start with improving this trail section, or I think you should start with, removing this dangerous section, whatever that might be. We don't know that because we're not trail builders, right? So I think that we're at the stage where we want to engage maybe one of the consultants that Foster has given us and get the right that we can move forward. So we can move forward with the implementation plan. Because I think if I'm a resident, I'm thinking like, well, the property, we gave feedback, like what is happening, right? So I think from my view, we want to have some sort of demonstration that we have some sort of plan that we can put forward. Phase one, we're recommending these actions, you know, and it might take several quarters or years even to do all of it. But until we have that plan, we don't know, you know, how to resource the work, right? I know that we have to have town staff to manage people who do work if it's volunteer work, and that's a constraint right now. So we need to start thinking about what we can do, you know, through this whole phase. And then, so the request is basically for, can we have the funding to engage one of these consultants? And is that feasible, or are there some parameters that we need to think about?
So we actually have funding available, associated with implementation of the Coyote Ridge Master Plan. So there is some money in there. I think the next step is, you know, as a town, we would compete that service. So we put together an RFP or an RFQ, and maybe I could work with several of you if you want to volunteer on the scope, because it's a pretty straightforward process. It's not very complicated, but identifying what we want that scope to be.
Is the timeline short enough that we have the chance of getting a consultant report by the end of the calendar year?
Before the snow flies.
I think engage them, and depending on what that scope is and how involved it is, it might be something they can complete this year or get started this year and complete next year. You know, I think that's fine. We have some currently, as the budget is laid out, we have funding in that block for implementation every year, a little bit every year.
So you just wanted to do phase one, like just to start out, because they'll have to look at the master plan too, for recommendations from Super Bloom to see like, oh,
so
what
they would look at
research.
Super Bloom and all the data, and then from that say, this is what I would recommend staging the work. And I think Leslie, you answered the other question I had, like who does the reach out?
Yeah,
Engagement of the
it's that-
consultant is through this RFP.
Yeah, and that would be a staff function, and we could do
Okay.
that, and then, like, I can definitely get input from this committee on what is the scope and how do we want to evaluate those people? Do we want to evaluate them, you know, obviously experience and, you know.
But I think we already have the working group of Todd and Mike.
Yeah, if you guys are willing to help with that scope.
Jumping in scope.
Sure, I mean, if there's a template that is.
Yeah, I can send it out.
Okay.
Oh, that'd be exciting.
Maybe some time to.
Yeah.
meet
Yeah.
lots of free stuff.
Because this is the part, the RFP process is one that I'm not as familiar with, so if there's a template we could look at, this is what we.
Yeah, I can send you the template, and really it can be bullet points
Yeah.
is what we can put in there, and
Right, we just want to make incremental progress on an implementation plan, I think that's my perspective of it. Yeah. So,
And then looking ahead, let's say optimistically, we get a set of recommendations from a consultant that says, here's step one and step two, which I'm concerned about because the horse is out of the barn on the parking lot project already, which means we're going to be putting more people up there. They're going to be using Coyote Ridge more. So it seems a priority to kind of take care of the safety issues and the really bad erosion issues pretty quick. So let's say optimistically we get a recommendation that addresses some of those things. Should we be asking now for some kind of budget package to either hire, as Mike suggested at the dinner, a temporary ranger or a summer ranger, somebody that can supervise a second youth team next summer to do some digging and weeding?
I think that's a good, it's backing for that recommendation. Yes, to ask for additional, you know, maybe it's a seasonal position to start with to help supervise youth corps type programs.
So how would we proceed to make this a possibility for next year's budget?
put it in our budget recommendation.
So this committee needs to put forth some budget recommendations, and I think
We're
gonna-
doing that next month.
next month, that will be on the agenda, and I can, yeah, I know,
We
right?
do, because we want to have that to you by July.
Basically, this is the recommendation we did last year, it's basically, the categories, the budget and the budget years and what we're recommending, and then there's some notes associated with that, whether it's, hey, we want a part-time person in 2026, we'd like that to move into a full-time position in 27. You know, we have implementation dollars at this amount this year, maybe that needs to grow every year.
Well, that's why I think the consultant
Yeah,
plan is the first step, right? 'Cause
Yeah.
we don't know how much money we may or may not need for the
The consultant is a this year
No,
project,
that's,
right?
that's,
So-
it's already.
So
What
we don't have any ability to implement anything from the consultant next year.
Yeah.
We need to, we
Right,
need to
We need
build
to-
it into the budget
but we
request
already
now.
are, because we knew once we got the master plan that we were gonna need money, that we couldn't do
So we
everything
projected.
immediately, so we projected 3 or 5 years out.
we typically do a 5-year projection, moving a kind of a rolling 5-year projection. It's it's approved annually, so it could change,
Yeah.
but,
We put in the second party and it got shut down. But we reminded them at the dinner that we're gonna ask again.
Yeah.
And I thought your idea of the temp position was a great one.
Yeah.
Because it really would give the opportunity to give us support when we desperately need it. And then if we get to a point where we knock out some things and we don't find that we continue to need that full, or we have a little clearly built justification for, yeah, we really do need it.
Yeah. Cause there's a window of weather when you realistically do the work.
Yeah, and initially I was thinking, oh, well, we'll really have a hard time getting good people in that position, if it's, if they know coming in, it's only a 3-year position. And I started thinking, oh, that's really not true. Because somebody would come in and it would be a great resume builder for people. I mean, so I was like, no, and the way that, no offense, Barry, but the way the current generation, and my sons are in this, move around, 3 years isn't considered a short term.
I mean, I think working on the RFP for somebody to go out there and say, here are your safety concerns. You need to take care of these in the next 6 months. Here are the major trail connections where you have the highest number of traffic. Those maybe are your next phase, build those into 2027,
Exactly.
whatever that is.
That's what we're gonna do is just gonna chunk it out so we have a plan that we can start.
And there may be
working
some,
towards.
there may be 1 or 2 that comes up that's like, we need to just hire somebody to do this.
Yeah.
We can't wait for a volunteer. This is beyond volunteers.
Well, Todd might just go ahead and work on the scope. I'm eager to see what you come back with next month. And then it'll flow right into, I'm sure, our budget conversation that we're gonna have next month as well. Anything that we're gonna need to include.
And the folks who do this kind of work will have some feedback
Right,
for us
right.
on how to.
And that's why I
proceed.
started with, asking about OSMP and who they did on
Yeah.
staff, because I've seen some great work that they've done on
Mhm.
Marshall Mesa, Dirty Market, all that stuff. So they know what they're doing. Todd and I can't we could go out there with a can of spray paint, but I think it's probably not the best way to approach it. So that's.
Yeah. Thank you,
Thank you.
appreciate that.
Thanks for that, team. Now let's go ahead and do our OSAC roundtable. Let's start with you, Kari. Do you have anything for the team?
Let's see. Well, later in the agenda, it says birthday activity. I think that's a separate topic, but it goes with migratory bird day. You guys should have received my email earlier today about all the details of the events and stuff. I just sent it to all of OSAC. I know some of you will not attend, so I'll just need that list finalized. Next thing I will send you guys is like the duties, so I need to finalize that based off of the spreadsheet you guys sign. If there's changes, let me know at the end of the meeting. Because there were some things that changed when I was finalizing stuff for vendors, so I'm gonna have to probably move some of you where it's needed. And then we'll, if there's issues, then we can talk about that, find a compromise. Other than that, it's wrapping up nicely and I'm excited. We have a lot of different, we just had like which is one of my friends, she's a ranger at OSMP and she volunteered to do a bird presentation.
Oh,
So
awesome.
that'll be a really cool one. And we have all our bird walks, everything scheduled, and I think we're good. 15 vendors will be there.
Wow.
Yeah, and everyone's super stoked about it, so. It'll be good turnout.
Good weather.
And the potions are back there too. I have them here to show you guys. We just got those, front desk just framed it today and I ordered those posters from, what's the Environment of the Americas. And we're gonna have them at our Wildlife and Raptor booth.
Thanks for that.
Thank you.
That's really fantastic.
Don't have any update.
No more sleep. Todd,
Nope.
Christie, Duh.
No.
Amber.
Wildlife Encouragement Team is having a walk on May 22nd from 11 to 12 at Grassville Park. We're gonna go look at the bridge and go look at the vegetation
Great.
around the creek area. That we cleaned up.
Okay, now that you mentioned that, I probably need to provide a little bit of update. So the bridge may be open by then. They're doing final punch walk early next week. And if everything is good and safe and they have everything checked off, we'll be able to open that up.
The underpass will open?
I went to the industrial park, industrial mine tour last week, or 2 weeks ago, and in the Grassel Park area looked really good. It's gonna be a nice finished product, I think.
What about the other side of the creek? Is that's still just a lot of big flat dirt?
Well, the trail now connects out, so you can go across, from the Grassel Park, across the bridge into the neighborhood.
But you cross that bridge and you look to the left, is that still all just,
Yes,
when I looked, it was just all like an acre or so of flat dirt?
yep, so that's been regraded and reseeded and,
That has been seasoned?
yeah, I
Okay.
mean, it will be a native type area, so, I mean, if there's opportunity for improvement there, we can look at those areas as well.
Today's good.
Right. The right stuff, right? Rita, do you have anything for
Nothing.
roundtable? And I don't either have anything. So let's look at, I think we've covered a lot of our reminders already. National Trails Day. Anything we want to talk about with National Trails Day coming up?
No, that one is, well, it's coming up in like, a couple more weeks, so you'll get another lengthy email from me about duties and schedule, all that stuff. Just expect that. And did we decide we were gonna do a different thing for OSAC booth? The game? Or are we doing the coyote game still?
Oh, we've got the one, the rodenticide
I have
game too.
that, yeah.
Yeah.
We can start those.
I think we need to, even maybe on a word plan item, have another game. But the reality is we're not even gonna have another OSAC meeting before National Trails Day. So
So just stick to that.
unfortunately, I think we're just gonna have to stick with that, and then we'll stand by your guidance via email on anything that you need from the committee.
Okay.
Although keep in mind our rules with email, it's not open for discussions per
Right.
se, but we will respond to direction.
And if you send out to all of OSAC, or if you're responding to one that isn't all OSAC email, make sure that you only reply to the person to whom it was sent.
Not reply at all.
Yeah, not reply all, because then we're violating the open meeting law.
Yes. Great. Okay, standing updates, Raptor program. He did.
Good update.
Yeah, Great pictures.
Wildlife monitoring. You know, that is to with. I didn't receive any updates per se, other than the ongoing.
One of our, GSAs saw an eagle fly by here, like out the window here, a bald eagle.
I saw, and I saw a bald.
I don't know where they're
eagle.
coming from or if they're nesting,
Yeah, it's
Maybe.
Yeah.
so maybe that's where it's
Yes.
from, but yeah, it's the first time we've had a sighting like that I'm aware of this
Probably
year.
came
Oh,
over to get.
I had one in my backyard a few weeks ago.
Oh,
you?
last year I went to those ones.
Oh, okay.
Closest I've ever been to one. You know.
I told them to email you all so you could put a
Yes.
pin on the.
And, the cameras catching, caught a deer, bobcat, and some coyote, and rabbits and.
Did the camera get moved to McCaslin?
No, they left it where it was because it was starting to, catch more things over there.
That's great.
Wildfire update,
Nothing.
prairie dog plan update.
Yeah, just a quick update. I did receive word that the site formerly known as the U.S. Army Pueblo Chemical Depot, which is now apparently the U.S. Army Chemical Materials Activity West.
Go on.
It's gotta be.
Going, whatever it's named, I'm glad it's still going. I think we'll be accepting prairie dogs in 2025. So their season runs from August 4th to October 30th. I don't foresee us needing it, but just so you guys know, I will update our playbook accordingly that that's on again this year. And then just another little reminder and plug that the prairie dogs are like really close to McCaslin, and as those yearling males get kicked out of the burrow here very, very soon, we're gonna probably see more dead prairie dogs along like Colton Trailhead and McCaslin. And I do feel that some of those males who do make it across are gonna try to disperse onto Town 15. So I'm hoping that if that's viewed as a wildlife corridor, then, you know, there's openness to coexistence there. I don't know. I don't know what will happen there, but I don't want that to happen. I would like them to stay back, where they were, but again, if there's any, and I really want to be sensitive to the mowing in the high priority area, but if there's any way to leave some visual barrier just along the road, then they're more inclined to stay back.
I think we were gonna leave the higher piece by the fence.
Which
Do you
is,
think that will work?
which,
So we wouldn't mow right up to the fence, we would
yeah, I
leave a
just,
swath up there.
since they got mowed initially, they breached it.
Yeah,
And now we don't have a barrier for the ones that breached it along between the fence and the road, you know what I'm saying? So I don't know. I don't know if the better answer is, there will be on the fence.
yeah, I don't,
Not that still would be good, but I don't know from a wild.
I think it looks very odd when you end up with a mohawk
I get it.
mow. So but we have talked to the mowing crews that we wanted to leave some tall grass. Because the cows comp it right up to the fence on the one side, so we need to have a barrier, hopefully, on the other side. We could come back and look at installing prairie dog fence there, but we would do it obviously on the existing fence.
Right,
And we'd have to work with the county on that as well, but,
yeah, I just would like to keep the dogs who already breached the fence away from Town 15. I just anticipate that being.
Mhm.
I don't know if you guys take calls and us have to figure out how to relocate them.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean. I'm not gonna chime in on, you know, where. Portions of grass should or should not grow, but from a barrier standpoint.
Yeah, I think that was
along the roadway would be
definitely a
better.
lessons learned.
I know, I get it.
That, you know, unintended consequences of trying to balance the fire mitigation and the wildlife management, but yeah.
I think whatever, thank you for
No, yeah, definitely. We'll keep learning as we go.
That reminds me for, you know, how National Trails Day, how we mow town 15 for parking.
Mhm.
And where the trailhead is just for the event, so there's no cars or people walking. Do you want to keep it that way? We would have to mow it, or we want to keep it natural, then I'll just have to scoot everybody up the hill.
I don't think residents would want that to be. I don't.
Because of all the things that are happening, you know, then.
We can
not
just,
touch
we
it.
can just mow, there's, you know, that one area that has a lot of gravel on it anyway.
Yeah, they're really big.
So we won't mow it all the way
yeah.
to the road, we can just,
Mhm.
because what you don't wanna do is park cars where you have tall grass. You know, like,
Right.
That's actually a good point, because if the grass is tall on that side, maybe they're less inclined to cross over if it's,
Yeah.
if there's a chunk left there.
We're gonna need that parking in July anyway. Pardon?
Yes, for 4th of July.
Yeah.
So we never use all of it.
No.
So
Yeah.
we'll mow
But I
like
just
that
didn't know.
interior square
It's
piece
not.
that
Right
already
near the
has,
entry.
That's
yeah,
a great, yeah,
Okay.
hopefully that will.
I just didn't know if like.
and we have Noah patch to, yeah, so people can walk over to the Colton Trailhead, we can mow a little path. But
that. Okay,
I think that's a good idea.
I don't mind keeping it all at the trailhead. So. But I'll note that.
Thank you, Amber. Also talking about lesson learned with our habitat preservation update, Rock Creek, Coal Creek, lesson learned meaning we probably should have been more proactive before the clean cutting, but how are things going, Leslie, with
so I actually,
reseeding efforts and
yeah, I actually had a meeting with Mile High Flood District today. They are working, they have a, if it's their revegetation specialist or what they call it, but they're gonna put together a plan, a revegetation plan.
For both.
Yes, I mean, basically be something that could be applied to when they do go in to mitigate, you know, dead trees that are flood hazard or wildfire hazard, that we have a plan in place for that. And I did talk to them about stepping back on some of those removals. I mean, we kind of had our hand forced this year just because of the volume of trees that were dying, but I think we've bridged that gap. So now we can work on a more comprehensive plan where when we revegetate in a way that hopefully those trees don't come back into that cycle of being hazard trees down the road. So whether that means they're located in a slightly different place, maybe they're not within the channel, but you know, still within the floodplain. And then does that include trees plus, you know, other pollinators, willows, some of those other species that we want.
And do we have a time frame on any of those?
I don't. And I have a feeling that the appetite to get some of that revegetation done earlier rather than later is we're probably gonna do some before the plan's done, is the way it's gonna work out. But some of that will be.
Sometimes that happens. We're talking earlier about township.
Yeah, and the town is certainly, we have funding to go in there and seed some of those areas. We have funding to buy trees, and we can set up a tree planting day. And people love to do tree plantings, so I think that's easy. But this communication has helped them understand that we need, you know, not just go in and remove the hazards, but we need the
Revegetation.
what a big lesson learned, right?
And it's not like they don't do that, but I think that they don't get challenged to do that a whole lot. So
you challenge.
Good.
You challenge.
I will say I have a brand new appreciation for hazardous trees. When I was most recently in Iowa, I was taking a walk in a very wooded, like miles and miles and miles greenbelt area, and was about a minute from exiting, and I heard the loudest plop snap I've ever heard in my life. I thought it was a gunshot. whole thing transpired and it was a tree that just snapped like 20 feet away from me. And I literally, like, to me, that was like a near-death experience. It was just a dead tree that was dry and snapped, and that scared the wits out of me. And I must have had someone watching out for me that day because it fell the other way. But to be walking along and just randomly have that happen, but it did, like, okay, I have this perspective, and Lynn's now like, when we're talking about that, I have a new appreciation for how dangerous and scary that can be.
If you hadn't been there to hear it, it wouldn't miss.
Yeah.
No, actually, someone heard it. So it runs in like, oh, it was crazy.
Thanks for that. And then Grant asks, I'm not aware of any that we're seeking that hasn't already been discussed. Migratory bird day. All right. Anything else to add?
No, I think it's just the activity, but
Mhm.
we already had the game, right, true, false, answer.
Anything new for Kevin in communications?
I am gonna ask him to do another push on the survey
Yes.
that's out there.
I've only seen it
The-
once on Facebook.
Yeah. They really focused their push right around Arbor Day. That was kind of the kickoff. And it's really slowed down, so, it's open through National Trails Day, and we'll do another push on that. Other than that,
That's good, and I will admit, I haven't done it because the second I got routed to enter my password, I was like, that website, I never remember my. Just need to reset, but. I think it's still lovely.
You still have the posters, right? And QR code.
yep, it's all the posters with the QR code you can take to my Migratory Bird Day.
Tomorrow, yeah,
Okay.
for the birthday.
Okay. That concludes everything that we have on the agenda, team. I just think it's absolutely amazing, the work that you all are doing. So thank you. I mean, robust agenda, but look at all of the work that you all are doing for the community. It's fantastic. Thank you for everything. This adjourns the meeting at 8:22. Thank you.
Are you so that the Migratory Bird Day email